Okay, I want to talk to you now about increasing your vocabulary. I think as you move on from here, the next stage really is to move into more professional levels. And one of the best ways of doing that is to massively increase your vocabulary. It's very important that you give time to do that because, first of all, it provides you with the tools that you need to communicate well and accurately and precisely. It helps you to become more professional in your approach to things, enables you to understand a whole range of different things which maybe you didn't understand before. And it takes you to that level of professionality which you would leave behind amateurs and people who are not able to articulate themselves and to understand a wide range of materials. I'm going to talk to you now about how to do that and how to extend your vocabulary. There's a dictionary naturally is going to be of most importance for you, and I think that we rely upon the internet a lot. If we don't have a particular word, we can put a word in and we can find out what they mean. And what I'm urging you to do is to actually take steps to either get a dictionary or use an online dictionary. It doesn't really matter, but to take steps to actually decide that you're going to increase your vocabulary and to take on board a whole set of words and things that you don't normally use, but you're going to just expand your abilities. Now, no one is going to teach you this. It's not part of any unit. It's not part of a course that you're going to do in computing, and yet it's absolutely vital for you to be able to communicate well in the world outside. And it's one of the simplest steps you can do. And what's more, you can't do it later on. You can't do it in middle age, for example, because you won't have the memory capacity to be able to do that. And all the research shows that if you want to learn words, learn languages, learn vocabulary, you have to do it the younger you are, the better facility you have. And at your age, I could learn quite a few words each day. I suggest you take the trouble to say, I'm going to learn 2-3 words each day. Maybe get yourself a book, maybe write them out and put some words down until you get a familiarity with those words and become able to incorporate them into your own speaking and your own language. And you will find that people will not only understand you better, and you'll be able to understand and be able to talk more accurately, people will respect what you say more too, because you will know more about what you're talking about because you'll be using more precise words, more accurate words, and maybe sometimes more technical words, but certainly the right word in the right place. So it's important to do that. You can also do it by getting yourself well read in terms of current affairs. Good newspapers, they're very important too. Good books, I'll say something about those. And surprisingly enough, I'm going to say something about Greek and Latin words too, which I'll take you through shortly. So, vocabulary size is important. You may not realise it, but the average English speaking person, native English speaking person, someone who's been brought up in the country, has a vocabulary of around about up to 20,000 words on average, maybe 15 to 20,000 words. It's often dictated by the kind of newspaper that they read and the kind of books which they look at. And if you're not used to reading books or reading magazines or newspapers, then your vocabulary will be somewhat limited and much smaller in size. You can get by in any language with about 8,000 words. People whose English is not their first language, they can get by with 5,000 words or even fewer than that. There is talk that you can get by with 800 words, but that's a little bit of a myth, and if you read David Crystal's website, you'll find it's not quite true. But you can get by with a bare smattering of that. But the average English person, 20,000 words. But the average university educated person should have a vocabulary of around 40,000 words. Now, what does that mean? That means that within the scope of your university education, something takes off, and that your language, up until the time you went to university, may be stuck at around 20,000 or a bit above that. And that university it grows and starts to grow continuously until you reach about middle age, in which case then you can't keep adding any new words to your vocabulary. One way of extending your vocabulary automatically, I remember when I was in the sixth form, it started for me. I used to read at home. We just had the Daily Mirror newspaper which came in, and had a very limited vocabulary requirement for that, only about 8,000 words. We didn't get stretched very much for that. But one of the things the sixth form did for me when I was in it was that they actually had a sixth form block, and they bought newspapers. So they may have done that in your sixth form. Maybe you already had this experience, but they had the Guardian, the Telegraph, and the Times, which it doesn't really matter what your political persuasion is. You might be left-leaning, as the Guardian puts it, the Times in the middle, Telegraph to the right, and you can, doesn't matter about that. But the point is, it expands your word power and your ability to take on. And it introduced me to a whole field of new words just looking at those newspapers at that time, a long time ago. You can look at magazines now too, but deliberately pick up magazines which will extend your vocabulary. So you can read The Economist if you're interested in that kind of thing, or The Critic, which is a new magazine out, or The Spectator, or you can read other magazines too. There's more scientific ones, Scientific American, or Nature. Those kind of magazines too are well worth looking at from a technical point of view. But get yourself into reading constantly. There's also books. If you don't read books, then your vocabulary will be very limited. And there are some fantastic books out there. We live in an unprecedented age whereby you have access to the greatest writings which culture has ever produced over the past 2,000 years, from the ancient Greeks right the way up to the present day. You can read fantastic histories from the Iliad of Homer and the Odyssey, and those stories which were created then. You can read books from the Renaissance period. You can read the original works of Galileo or Newton, if you so wish to do so, and expand your horizons. One thing which I found when I used to read some works from the 1600s was how much we have lost in terms of our vocabulary. They seem to be miles ahead of us. You think, you look back to the 1600s and you think, what could they know? But they had a much better grasp of language than we had. You may notice some of the books behind me here. Many of them are written in the 17th century, and they are very, very detailed and comprehensive. Works of William Perkins and Ramus and those people who laid out the structure of the topic in painstaking detail. John Owen is well known for doing that, an old Puritan writer. So there are some amazing books. Read some amazing novels up to date as well. More recent novels. Read anything by Rebecca, by Daphne du Maurier, for example, or anything by Daphne du Maurier is fantastic read, and brilliant vocabulary too. Read George Orwell if you have the opportunity. Read more recently, you can read J.R. Tolkien and the Lord of the Rings. Never mind the movies, that don't do any justice to the actual book themselves. You can be totally immersed in a completely different world. Well worth reading books like that and be extended well beyond the boundaries of your normal view and vista. There are fantastic books by Victorians, Charles Dickens. There's Arthur Conan Doyle, all the Sherlock Holmes mysteries. If you've not read any of those, fantastic resource. You can go back in time to Wilkie Collins. You can go and look at the Charlotte Bronte sisters, Jane Eyre and Wuthering Heights. These are classic books which should be read by everybody really at some time or other. Well, over in America, you've got Herman Melville, Moby Dick, fantastic story of revenge and obsessional monomania in pursuit of the whale Moby Dick. Brilliantly written book, fantastically put together. Can't recommend it highly enough. There are some chapters which are just about whales and tackle whales, so you may need to jump over those, but the rest is a fantastic story. And then there's more recent histories which you can have. There's histories of the Gulag Archipelago by Alexander Solzhenitsyn. Fantastic book about the way in which Russia dealt with its dissidents and the shipping people off to the Gulag. It's an astonishing thing which we shouldn't miss out our understanding of history in that realm. Probably 60 million people died in that event. And you should know about those kind of things, which you can only get by taking account of your own education. And in doing so, you'll also expand your vocabulary too. So plenty of good books for you out there. Read them, deliberately read them. Try and read a new book every week if you can. That will massively ramp up your vocabulary, massively ramp up your knowledge of the world as well. There's philosophy books. You can read books by John Locke or David Hume, or more recently by Karl Popper. Brilliant insights into the world. Have a look at some of those. Plenty of good books. Don't neglect the reading. People don't understand why they need to read, but you need to read in order to increase your vocabulary. You need to increase your vocabulary in order to be able to communicate better, to be able to write better, to be able to be a persuasive person, to be a person to be taken account of in any dialogue or debate with anyone else. There's nothing more powerful for you than being able to communicate with other people. And to be able to do that, you need to read, and read some good books. There's plenty of them out there, free of charge. And this last one here, know some Greek words. This is something which I think might take you by surprise, but there's no quicker way to understand how to enlarge your vocabulary than learning about some Greek words. I'm going to take you through some of those in the next video. So have a look at that, and I'll talk to you about typical Greek words, which will help you to understand English words, and a whole pile of them, in a way which will probably be quite a revelation to you if you've never seen them before. So come back for the next video.